My name is Mark Stevenson. I've been serving as the Director of Disability Concerns for the Christian Reformed Church for 15 and a half years, and will be closing out my work with the CRC Disability Concerns Ministry at the end of this year. A new person will be coming on board as the director. Her name is Lindsay Wheeling Capel, and I do hope that all of you have the opportunity in one way or another to meet her sometime after she begins. We are going to start with a brief land acknowledgement, recognizing that we're coming from a variety of places. But because land acknowledgements are about place, I will name the place where I am, the land acknowledgement of where I am, which is in West Michigan. And this is the territory of the Council of the Three Fires, Ojibwe, Chippewa, and Potawatomi. The Ojibwe Indians are also sometimes known as Ottawa Indians. So we thank you and are deeply grateful that you are here gathered tonight. And Becky, I think you have a few words to get us into this time together too.
We have a lot packed into this hour. So I am going to turn it over to Kara right now so she can introduce our devotions.
Awesome. It is good to see all of you for one last week. I just wanted to introduce my friend Tim. Tim Schmidt lives here in Calgary, and he's the author of a 30-day devotional called Chasing After Him, 30 Days Pursuing the Heart of God, which we will link in the chat. And Tim is a Bible college graduate and has a heart as an advocate for teens with disabilities. So we are glad he is here, and we have his devotional. Thanks, Tim.
Whenever I pray, I make my requests to all of you with joy, for you have been my partners in spreading the good news about Jesus from the time you first heard it until now. I was born with cerebral palsy. That tells me that at some point, God decided it would be good for me to spend my life in a wheelchair. That to walk properly, I would need to have braces on my feet and use a pair of crutches to get from point A to point B and beyond. I used to ask God to heal me and make me walk normally. But then he told me the same thing he told the Apostle Paul in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9. No, I don't need to heal you. My grace is all you need. That tells me that I'll probably spend my whole life in a wheelchair. Even so, that doesn't slow me down. When I read in Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 11, that God has a plan for me, I believe it. Or when someone tells me that I was born this way so that the glory of God can be seen through me, I believe it. Then I'm reminded to ask God for help, just like it always says in 2 Corinthians, which usually happens after I'm finished cooking or baking. I love to cook. One of my favorite places to be is in my kitchen, trying out a new recipe, or even better, creating a new recipe. I also love going to the grocery store, wandering up and down the aisles. I can shop for any ingredient I need. More often than not, the ingredient I need is just beyond my reach. It's either on the top shelf or it's in the back of the freezer, and the only way I can get to it is to ask for help, to borrow another person's arms and legs. Such is the life of people with special needs. God assures us that even though we have special needs, he still has a purpose and a plan for our lives. But the ingredient we need to fulfill that plan is just beyond our reach. And when we ask God for help, he will send people like you into our lives as advocates. You guys are often the missing ingredient we need to fulfill whatever purpose or plan God has for us. The Apostle Paul calls that grace. Scripture says that God's grace is all we need. So all we need are people like you to help us fulfill the purposes and plans that God has for our lives. Kara invited me here today to share a devotional with all of you. But I'd like to switch gears and say thank you. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you for taking the time to meet like this and grow your craft so that you can better live out your calling to serve the special needs community. As a person who sometimes needs an advocate, thank you. Thank you for being our hands and feet whenever they fail. You are the key ingredient we need to fulfill the purposes and plans that God has for us. Without you, we would never be able to have the mighty power of God within to accomplish more than we could ever ask or imagine. Just like it says in Ephesians chapter 3, verse 20. So thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Really appreciate that. And I would also want to turn that around because I know from all the people that I am friends with who have disabilities that I, who currently live without a disability, need you and others who live with disabilities to accomplish the purposes that God has in my life. And I praise God for that too, that we all need each other and we depend upon each other. So today our theme is being there, knowing that we're contributing and loved. And one of our speakers is somebody I just met this evening, though I've been reading her blogs for a while. I've been reading her blogs for a while and have known her for years, and we've become friends, and I'm deeply grateful. So that's Chantel, the one that I've known for many years. Chantel Hunick is the coordinator of organizational and spiritual life for Christian Horizons and a contributor to the Disability and Faith Forum. She's a motivational speaker, consultant, author, and social justice advocate. She holds Masters of Divinity and of Social Work. Chantel's education and experience as a woman with a physical disability has made her keenly aware of the need for holistic care, including consideration of physical, emotional, psychological, and spiritual needs. And Jasmine, who I just had the privilege of meeting tonight, Jasmine Duckworth, integrates her personal perspective as a disabled person with her professional experience serving at Christian Horizons, where she works to nurture communities of belonging for people with disabilities. She also writes at Disability and Faith, the Disability and Faith Forum, and speaks publicly on topics related to disability, ableism, and the church. And we can give you contact information later. But I just want to invite you to give a warm welcome to both Jasmine and Chantel.
Yay. Okay. Thank you for that warm introduction, Mark. It's a delight to be here with you all again this Thursday night. And Jasmine and I are looking forward to sharing some of our personal and professional experiences with you. And so I wanted to start by highlighting a blog that I recently wrote that was posted on Disability Concerns called The Power of Hospitality, Mutuality, and Solidarity. And that was inspired from an advocates training that happened this past August in partnership with the Next Generation Office. And they said there are three key things that keep people from the next generation in the church. And those are hospitality, mutuality, and solidarity. And officially, I'm not quite from the next generation yet, but I really, really loved what they said because it really resonated with the experience that I've had in the church that I've been a part of for the last 11 years. So when I first rolled through the door, it happened to be student welcome Sunday, and I knew they were preparing lasagna. And so that was an experience of hospitality for me. But however, before I could get to the lasagna, I was approached by a ministry coordinator that said, we would really, really love it if you would serve in the children's ministry. And I thought she must be a little bit bananas because she clearly didn't see the wheels on my chair that were as big as a preschooler. And like we had just met, so she had no idea how capable I was or not. And so I wanted to give her a moment to come to her senses. So I said, my goal is to finish grad school, and I'm keeping my head down, trying not to commit to other things. Any of you who really know me know that I commit to a lot of things, but it was a short-lived persona that I was putting on. And so she walked away, and I figured the conversation was over. And then, to my surprise, when I came back the following week, she approached me again and she said, we really need people to serve in this way. It would only be every few weeks. Would you consider doing it? And I, again, thought that she must be bananas, but clearly she was desperate. So I said to her, okay, if you really need someone, I'll agree on the condition that you partner me with an able-bodied volunteer. I was thinking at that point that at least if I flattened the little children, it wouldn't be solely my fault. And so, surprisingly, she came back a few weeks later and she said, and she was sincere. She said, I'm really, really sorry. We're short on volunteers and I'm having difficulty finding another person to partner with you. Would you be able to bring someone with you? And at that point, I was really struck by the fact that this woman had more confidence in me than I had in myself. So as she requested, I came with an assistant and we taught the wedding at Cana. And I received a little bit of ribbing thereafter from some dads who were a little bit upset, shall we say, that I taught their 3-year-olds how to turn water into wine by dripping red grape juice, red food coloring into white grape juice. But all that to say, we taught and I had a great time and I learned that I could do it. And I'm really grateful for that experience several years ago because I still have 11 years ago, because I still have relationships with those children who are now 14 years old. And I could go on and on and on about experiences of solidarity with the congregation that I'm now a part of. And if we had 11 years, I could give you a play-by-play from week to week. But just to highlight one that really sticks out for me at the moment, when I shared with the congregation that I felt called to be a Christian Reformed chaplain serving on behalf of our church, in spite of my challenges, or maybe because of them, who knows really what the differences would be, the church council felt free to call me and continues to hold my credentials and holds me accountable to serving in the community. And so that's just one of the ways that I'm not only served by my church, but I have valued opportunities to serve there as well. So Jasmine, can I hand it over to you?
Yeah.
Or maybe you can tell me what's next.
I think I'm supposed to give a little overview of Christian Horizons because we've said we both work for Christian Horizons. I've been there for 17 years. I started working in a group home. And if you've heard of Christian Horizons, that's probably what you're most familiar with is the fact that we support people in group living environments. But Christian Horizons does a lot more than that. We also support people who live independently in their own apartments, and maybe they have staff that come in just a couple hours during the week. We support people with vocational training and employment skills and job coaching. We have partnered with colleges to help people get post-secondary education and co-op placements. We've supported people in lots of different ways. We've done children's respite and adult respite, kind of whatever you can think of. we'll usually try it. So that's some of the services we offer in Ontario and Saskatchewan. And then we have a global branch that does different things around the world in different developing countries. So that's a little bit about Christian Horizons, and something that we talk about all the time with our staff. So I said I started working in a group home, and then I worked in our staff education department for about 10 years. And now I work in community development, where I love my job. Half of it, I get to work with a lot of churches and community partners to try to build spaces of belonging so that when people with disabilities come through the doors of whatever institution we're talking about, they are deeply welcomed. And then the other half of my job is working with the self-advocates and the people that use Christian Horizon services that have advocacy groups. And they're trying to, I got to email Justin Trudeau last week on behalf of a group of advocates asking for help with the staffing crisis. So very cool advocacy things, because we are working on building communities within Christian Horizons where everybody belongs. So that's a little bit about what I do, but something that we talk about a lot at CH, and I talked about a lot when I was in the staff education role, was how important it is to get to know each person specifically. Just like you guys all, I think, have this handbook, just like a book needs to be read in order to be useful. It can't just sit on the shelf and it's going to magically, impact your life. People need to be known. And so, Chantel, you were going to tell a story now about getting to know a pair of brothers.
Yeah. And so just before I go into that, I just want to say that I really, really appreciate the Everybody Belongs Serving Together handbook that just came out. And there are a few things that I really, really appreciate, but the first thing was that I didn't have to write it. It goes into this idea that sometimes individuals with disabilities can feel tired of advocacy and like they don't want to do it all the time. And so it was really cool that I didn't have to write such an excellent resource. The other thing that I think is really, really cool is that it's written and edited by multiple authors. If there's one thing that you know about disability, it's that if you've met one person with a disability, you've met one person with a disability, right? We're not easily represented by one author or one group. So the fact that it has multiple authors and multiple firsthand perspectives is really, really helpful. And I just find it really, really practical and accessible, not only for the writing that's involved, but for the various formats it comes in. So thank you for that. Christian Horizons was also involved in the project along with the Elam Christian Services, and we have purchased many, many copies and plan to share them with as many pastors and church leaders as we possibly can. So several years ago, I had the joy of serving at a Johnny and Friends family retreat. And while there, I met two brothers. I rolled up to them, and the first one said, "Hi, this is my brother Caleb. He's 11. I'm Jaren, and I'm 7. Now, Caleb, so he didn't say this to me, but I quickly noticed that Caleb was someone who doesn't use words to communicate. And to look at him, you would notice multiple challenges off the bat. He's got various deformities and things that he struggles with. And so if I were introduced to him in any other way, shape, or form, I might have been inclined to focus strictly on what Caleb cannot do. But because his little brother, first off of that, without any coaching that I could see, introduced their relationship and had me know him by that way, and clearly didn't seem to care or notice his brother's limitations, that made me question, why should I? And so I think that was the first kind of experience that I had to realize that, yes, disabilities can be a significant aspect of people's lives, but they are not the only thing. And for some people, they're the first and foremost thing that we talk about, kind of get it out of the way. But most people with disabilities that I know want to be known for other things as well. And so I really appreciate how the handbook encourages us to get to know individuals with disabilities rather than coming up with cookie cutter accommodations and solutions for them.
Chantal, you were going to talk a bit about how churches can kind of bring those accommodations or eliminate those barriers right up front. And you had a personal example of that.
Yes. Okay. So I just talked all about how getting to know people and individuals as individuals is really, really important. But like I said, there are people that want to be known for more than or for different attributes other than their abilities and disabilities. And so one of the ways to kind of get beyond that is to do some proactive accessibility work. And so I really appreciate that the handbook and Disability Concerns Office for many, many years has advocated for large print resources, bulletins, liturgies, et cetera, et cetera. Prior to coming to the church that I'm a part of now, I had never participated in the singing except for memorizing the songs that I knew well, and I had never participated in the responsive reading because I can't read small print, and so I figured I couldn't access the liturgy, and that was that. I had never tried reading a large print liturgy, and so I never knew how that would open the doors of participation in that aspect of holy worship for me. And so I was really shocked when, coming through the door, I noticed a large print liturgy for the first time, and I could all of a sudden participate in a new way, in a profound way. And so while we can invite individuals and families to kind of indicate kind of the accommodations they're seeking, they might not always know what could possibly benefit their lives or their family members' lives. And so the more accommodations we can offer proactively, I think the more chance we have for people of all abilities to grow together.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So you told your story about teaching Sunday school at the beginning, and you were shocked that this woman would ask you. Any of us who know you are probably not shocked because you walk in a room and right away we know you're friendly, you're outgoing, you're articulate, you're enthusiastic. This is a person who should work with kids. And it's fairly obvious that you would need minimal accommodations in order to do that, right? And it sounds like you did need minimal accommodations, and you did all sorts of stuff teaching them how to turn water into wine, and like that is an ambitious Sunday school teacher for a group of 3-year-olds. So what about people, though, that are not as obviously gifted as someone like Chantal, people who maybe more like Caleb that you described earlier, that people might notice the limitations before they notice the gifts and might need more significant accommodations to contribute. So I want to share a story about Mark, and I'm going to share my screen so you guys can see a photo of Mark. Mark is somebody who Christian Horizons supported for years. He lived in one of our residential homes, and he has since passed away, but I reached out to his parents and they're happy for me to share his photo and tell his story. And this is Mark. I became aware of him. I didn't actually ever get to meet him, unfortunately, but I became aware of him because I heard about him getting this award. And this is the story, that the write-up that went with the award. It says, on a bi-weekly basis, Mark visits the preschool class, shares his time with them, and teaches them about his wheelchair and about diversity. At a young age, these children were once unfamiliar with Mark's wheelchair and exceptional needs. While curious at first about his wheelchair and how it works, now the children hardly notice it when he shows up. They see Mark, their friend, with a heartwarming smile that fills the class with joy. The children have discovered the value of inclusion, sharing, and interacting with Mark during playtime and stories. They offer him toys to play with and run small cars along his leg, which usually makes Mark grin with delight. And I love that story about Mark because it shows how much value he brought and contributed to that preschool class, even though maybe his gifts weren't as obvious right away. I don't think Mark used words to communicate. Mark had very little physical ability to move himself around in space. And yet his community saw the gifts that he could bring, and they found a context where he could really contribute something of value. And then the children contributed to his life as well. And it makes me think of Judith Snow, who's a disability advocate and author. And she talks about this idea of giftedness, is that we all have gifts. Some people are good at one thing, other people are good at something else. But the two basic gifts that every single person has is presence and difference. Just by coming here tonight, you are present and you are uniquely yourself. Nobody else can fill the space that you're filling tonight in this context. And by being here, you're offering one half of a meaningful interaction. You guys are going to get to be in breakout rooms later and talk to each other, and you're bringing your presence and your difference into that breakout room to be one half of a meaningful interaction. And the other people showing up with presence and difference will be the other half of that meaningful interaction. And hopefully you guys get a chance to encourage each other and learn from each other. And that's what Mark did in that class. He showed up present and different, and so did the children. And together, they created this meaningful interaction, which makes me think of Ephesians 2:10. We are all created. I'm going to open it so I don't butcher my paraphrasing. For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. As Christians, it's really important that we recognize that in each person that we meet. And I love that the people around Chantel, they saw that in you, that you are created in Christ Jesus with good works that God prepared in advance for you to do. And they right away tried to find those places for you to do that good work. Mm-hmm. And Mark had a similar community around him. And so how do we bring that attitude to all of the people in our church congregations, including those with disabilities? People without disabilities too. Sometimes we have to look hard to find their gifts. But it made me think of some examples that I've seen. There was a man who was supported by Christian Horizons who loved putting IKEA furniture together. And so his church actually started offering an IKEA assembly ministry. People in the community could drop off their IKEA furniture anytime, and he would come in on Tuesdays and he would assemble whatever was there, and then they could pick it up. Tons of people from the community came through those church doors and interacted with the church that wouldn't have in any other way, because how many of us hate putting together IKEA stuff? So they looked at his gifts and were like, how can we use this in the church? Another example, when I was a child, there was a man with a developmental disability at the church that I went to. And when the service would end, all of us kids would, run in the parking lot and just, go wild after being cooped up. And our parents would be chatting in the lobby. And this man would go around and catch each child and bring them over to the parents and put them hand in hand and say, here's your boy. I found him. He's on the parking lot. And he knew all the children, and people saw that he knew the children and loved the children and cared about their safety. And so in the summer, he went to the church camp, and they gave him the role of sitting in the playground, and he'd bring his 8-track player and he'd play music, and he had a box of Band-Aids, and parents felt safe to drop their kids off at the playground because they knew he was there, and that if they got hurt, he'd pick them up, he'd give them a Band-Aid, he could help them find their parents because he paid attention and he knew who belonged to who. So in churches, it's really important that we look beyond our traditional roles of usher, greeter, Sunday school teacher, reader, and look at what are the gifts of the people who are here and how can we use them in creative ways. My last example of this is personal. I was really sick a few years ago, and I had to give up all my volunteer roles at church. I couldn't sing on the worship team or help in the nursery or be on the welcome team because all of those roles had accessibility issues for me at the time. And I was really bummed out by not being able to contribute to the body of Christ. And so what I found was I had good friends who both wanted to volunteer at their youth group, but the wife hadn't been able to because they had small children at home. So she'd been home for the last few years. So I babysat their kids every Tuesday night so that they could both go and run youth group. That was my contribution to the body of Christ, was babysitting these 4 kids, because not everybody could do that. They were very energetic children, but I could do that even with my body that felt very broken at the time. Some nights it meant that I went upstairs and I laid in the parents' bed and I just listened to the children playing, and I was there in case they needed me. And other nights it meant that I was on my feet and playing with them, depending on what I could do that day. But I was filling that role. And I told my pastor, I said, I'm not volunteering at church, but this is what I'm doing instead so that they can volunteer at their church, not even the same congregation. And my pastor was like, that's awesome. Keep doing that. We're all one body. So I'm passing it back over to you, Chantel. You had a story about a creative solution with your youth pastor, and then you're going to pass it into breakout rooms, right?
Yeah, that's the plan. Cool. Thanks, Jasmine. And thanks for sharing the story of you serving the body of Christ rather than a specific church. I think that's a good lesson for us to all learn. So a number of years ago, some of you may have heard this story already, but for those of you who haven't, we're going to send you into breakout rooms really shortly. And so we just wanted to give you some ideas of creative solutions, and so that you can start thinking about the fact is the belonging together, serving together handbook is not going to give you a prescription for belonging or serving together, but we want to encourage you all to think of one individual who has been positively incorporating their gifts into your community and how that has occurred. Or if that hasn't occurred yet, think of someone you know and try to imagine what it would be like if they were positively incorporated into the body and able to serve. How would they benefit, and how would the church benefit? So my experience of this, when I was 15, I joined a youth group and I enjoyed myself immensely the first few times that I went there. And then about 3 weeks in, I can remember voluntarily excusing myself because I knew that the youth group would be traveling to an event that was probably on a bus that wasn't accessible. And so I asked the youth pastor if there was anything I could do at the church instead while the kids were away. And he said, well, don't you want to go to the rally with us? And I said, well, of course I do, but I don't have a ride. And he looked at me and he was obviously confused. And he said, well, that's what the bus is for. And I said, well, is the bus accessible? And he goes, oh, I don't know. And I said, well, I've never been on a school bus before. That's not safe for me in my wheelchair, quote unquote, or at least that's what I've been told. And he looked at me and he was really confused. He goes, are you serious? And I said, yeah. And he goes, well, if you want to come to the rally with us, come half an hour early and we'll get you on the bus and you can come with us. And I looked at him and I was confused again. I said, well, how are you going to do that? And he said, well, I don't know, but we're going to figure it out. And those words, I don't know, but we'll figure it out, were the door to social well-being, because the strength of my youth pastor, as he lifted me and myself onto the bus safely, demonstrated that I was not a burden to him and my friends, but a blessing to them, and they wanted me present. And what's more, they dramatically improved my spiritual being because they showed that God made it possible for me to get on the quote-unquote inaccessible school bus. And so breaking down barriers might not look or feel like you think it will. A theologian friend of mine pointed out the irony of needing to be a literal burden in the youth pastor's arms in order to discover that I was, in fact, not a burden. So that's kind of a bit of a mind twister, but I'll leave you with that thought. And maybe Jasmine or someone, can you read out the questions so that people know what they're going to?
Sure. So we've got 3 questions and you can kind of discuss as you will.
Pick at them.
Yeah. Describe the unique gifts of one person in your community. Maybe you have an example of somebody who comes to mind. How has your church meaningfully incorporated these gifts? Or how might they work towards this if you see a gap, where they're not being incorporated now? And in what ways has the community been blessed as a result? Or in what ways do you imagine that the community could be blessed as a result? So we designed these questions hoping you're not going to feel bad if you can't think of an example of a time where it's happened well, but that you have a creative imagination for, but it could work like this, or it could be good like this. So I think Becky is also, can you drop those in the chat when people get to their breakout rooms so that they can see them?
Yep. I'll be doing that. Yeah, absolutely.
And we're going to give you about 5 to 7 minutes, I think, and then we're going to call you back, and we'll leave some time for people to share key ideas if they want to, but also just to ask Jasmine and I questions and comments are good too. I'm just wondering if there are one or two brave souls who would like to share, maybe if a light bulb went off in their group or something touched them. If you want to say a few words, now is your opportunity. Don't be afraid. We don't bite. And even if we did, we're on Zoom. So
I personally was just so thankful we did some small groups, even just for the minute, just to be able to meet a few new people. So our groups had a variety of stories, including seeing people's gifts used, even though they maybe weren't able to share their stories verbally, end up writing some books, and they got published as children's books. And so this ability just to share gifts, another church I loved, she was talking about how they dragged them through, but basically they were teaching the entire congregation some sign language, and it's added to this beautiful extra bit of way of worship. So I think it's leading, not dragging. But anyways, it was a great example of that. And I had just shared how when we moved to Calgary, I had never been to a church that had people with disabilities as part of it. And we had prayed partly that would be part of our new church. And when I walked in the very first Sunday, the person greeting me happened to have Down syndrome as a greeter. And Darren looked at me, he's like, "Oh, I guess this is our church." So I was like, "Yeah, I guess it is."
That's cool.
And it was. Yeah. So it was a pretty obvious answer to prayer. Just like, if all things could be that obvious, it would be really handy.
Yeah.
But that was our introduction to River Park. So that was our group.
Well, and similarly, Kara, I feel like the experience of this woman persisting and needing me is something that kept me coming back, right? So that's the value of mutuality. And sometimes God does it in ways that we don't expect, but he keeps us where he needs us to be.
And that need is also can be a gift. We sometimes see a need as the opposite of a gift, right? But she needed you, and that was a gift to you. Similarly, Judith Snow talks about walking as a gift, but not walking as a gift. Reading as a gift, not reading as a gift. And Chantel, you and I have found that recently, but with reading. Yeah. Reading out loud is a gift that I have, but not reading words in a book on paper is a gift that you have. And we have another friend that also has difficulty reading on his own. And so the three of us together are in a reading circle and we read out loud together. And it's not that there's gifts and deficits, both gifts, right? Reading, not reading allows us that meaningful interaction to read together and talk together and learn together. And I'm getting so much more out of the books by reading them out loud in this reading circle than I would by myself, because I'm learning so much from you and our other friend.
I'm glad you're getting something out of it, because it takes us like a long time to get through one page just because we talk so much. But it's good. It's really good.
It's so good. And I listed that as one of the things to my boss recently about like, what am I doing for personal development outside of work that relates to my job? And one of them, I said, I have this reading circle where I sit with two people with cerebral palsy and I learn from them. And so, the not reading is the gift that you bring. And then all your other gifts, right? But that was the gift that allowed the group to form. Cool. And then I get to experience all the other gifts that you bring, and I get to learn from you every week. So it's good.
All right. Thanks, Ez. If people want to share more about their small groups, they can. If we want to just open it up for questions and comments and conversation, that's okay too.
It looks like Corinne has a question.
I actually don't have a question. I just wanted to share a little bit from our group. I just, they were just sharing about how the one lady was just sharing about how, it's just a blessing. Everybody just is a part of it. And she didn't really have an example, but it just came to mind. Something that we're doing in our church is we have a lady that has a lot of mental health issues and is quite out of control, has made a lot of enemies. She's very passionate about evangelism, absolutely, but very inappropriate. She'll steal Bibles so that she can hand them out on the bus, and then she'll grab someone on the bus and has been threatened kidnapping because she drags them to church with her. So not a great scenario, but so the leadership came together and I was asked to sit on a little mini committee, for lack of a better word, about how we can get to know her build a relationship with her, find a way to get her connected, using her gifts, finding her story. And I just was so encouraged and empowered by that, because that was our leadership saying that, not, oh, you know what, she's a problem, we have to figure out, we have to ask her to leave, and how's the best way to do it. That never crossed the table. And they're like, you know what, we need more people like her with that evangelism gift. We just need to put boundaries on it, or
Yeah.
you know, and I just love that in this group. We still don't know what we're going to do with her because we've tried a few things and they haven't quite worked yet, but we're just really trying to work with her and just include her in the body, in who she is, with her special gifts and extra things that come with her. So I just was really encouraged when I got to be a part of that group, and just that was a bit unexpected. So
it's really excellent that the please leave is not on the table. That's who knows how many years ago, and it might have been, right? And so that's progress in itself. Thanks for sharing that with us.
In our group, we talked a little bit about our experiences with people participating with disabilities in our service. We had one gentleman who wanted to be part of the praise team, and when he does, he really feels good. He feels that he's valued and he belongs. We had one lady who, with a little bit of help, read part of scripture, and she stated herself, said, "This is now how I feel I belong to this church, because they are allowing me to be a participant."
Tomorrow morning, I get to go to the Ottawa Civic prayer breakfast here in the city, where the mayor and the police chief and, the fire marshal, they're all there, and all the bunch of pastors and Christian business leaders come together, and we pray for the city and for each of our public services. And we bought a table, and I'm going with some of the people that live in Christian Horizons and use our services. And I love this. I haven't been able to go because COVID. But one of the gentlemen that uses our services, his name is Joe, and Joe is a pastor, not with credentials or any kind of ordination or, education, but I know his heart. He's a pastor, and God has given him that pastor's heart, that pastor's spirit. Every time you see him, he's like, "God bless you. So glad you're here." He just exudes that pastoral spirit. And I love getting to see him come to the prayer breakfast, because it's like I see him among his people. He blends in. He comes in a suit. He's carrying his Bible under his arm. He speaks very, very little, but he has no signs of obvious disability. And I love when all the other pastors don't realize that he's somebody supported by Christian Horizons, and they think that he's a pastor of a local church, and then come up and introduce themselves and shake their hands. And he just responds with, "Oh, God bless you. Glad you're here." And it's just neat to see him being, in his natural environment, because if not for his intellectual disability, I think that he probably would have gone through the route of education and credentials and ordination, and he would be a pastor. But it's lovely to see him be able to use those gifts the way he does in his community. He opens all of our things with prayer. He closes with prayer. He just loves the people around him and cares for them with that pastor heart. And so I'm really excited to get to see him bring that to the broader community tomorrow, and kind of be recognized among his pastor peers, even though he's not technically a pastor. I don't know why that story made me think of him, because sometimes the gifts, they're not obvious the same way, and people may not have gone through the same route. But we need to recognize that in each other and see what has God put in your heart? Who has he created you to be? And how do we find the places where that shines? So I'm excited to see Joe shine tomorrow morning. Diane has her hand up.
Yeah. I was just curious. It's really become clear to me that we need to be led or helped with the people with disabilities, because we can put in, like you said, token changes, and it may not address the issues at all. So is there a way to do that, like in an appropriate way or a loving way, like to say, what are your needs, or what can we do more for you? Is there someone's experience?
I really like the question that you posed just now. What are the needs, or do you have any needs, or do you have any support needs that, I mean, that opens the door for them to explain or to say, no, thank you, I'm fine. Right? That will go a long way, as opposed to what someone might do, which is assume that someone has needs or requirements to participate, and maybe they don't. So.
Yeah, and I think the more we can make that just a regular practice of asking, what are your needs? Like, I love now when I register for conferences, there's usually a box that says, do you have any accessibility needs? And I can just fill it out. And I know they're asking every single person who registers. And so then the people who need to disclose can do that. And the people who don't can just say no. But it removes the step of me having to like find out, who do I talk to? How do I contact them? How do I find out about access needs? And putting the burden on me to figure it out for myself. If it's just built right in, and it also isn't them singling me out and saying, oh, I noticed you have a walker. What do you need? As opposed to all the other people who don't, like it's just, so in church congregations, having somebody identified or an email address or something for, if you have accessibility needs, contact this person, and having it right there on your website or your bulletin or, whatever, so that when people come in, it's easy for them to figure it out, and they know that they've been thought of in advance, and that welcome mat has been rolled out in a very specific way for them, but not in a way that walks up and is like, I notice you're in a wheelchair. What can I do for you? It's a welcome mat that's been rolled out for whoever needs it, and then they can.
Yeah, universal design, as opposed to singling individuals out, making everyone welcome.
Yeah. Well,
and people who suffer with anxiety, depression, the invisible. Would that also be a good thing to say, having a newsletter or your weekly chat, if to word it appropriately, that please contact us if we can accommodate you, or would that be a good way to go too? Or I just don't have the right vocabulary, to how to word things.
I think the first way you worded it was very clear. Do you need anything? Right? Like, without listing all the specific disabilities you may or may not have thought of in advance, because guaranteed we're not going to think of them all. But just saying, if you have any access needs, or if you have any support needs or accessibility needs, or whatever word you want to use, reach out to us at this place, and just then people can contact you or whoever if they do.
I agree. Yeah. If others have thoughts regarding that, you can speak up as well. Sorry, Mark, you've been trying to get in there.
Well, yeah, this is a great conversation, and we really need to wrap it up for the sake of those, since we're at the top of the hour. I was just going to mention one phrase that we like to use with Disability Concerns when people register for events is we ask something like, what do you need so that you can participate as fully as possible?
Yeah.
And so it's just, an open question for everybody, about, and then sometimes we'll give some examples as well. Were you going to follow up on that, Chantel?
I just really love that, because you're anticipating full participation, right? You're letting them know that they're not just meant to be on the periphery.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I learned, thanks to friends who speak sign language, that a good way to give an acknowledgement is to put one's hands in the air and shake them back and forth. So let's acknowledge and give thanks for Chantel and Jasmine for your participation tonight. We really, really appreciate it. I always learn so much, and thankful for this series, thankful for all of you who have been participating, maybe 1 week, maybe all the weeks, just thankful that we can be together. I have never heard such a ringing endorsement as I have from Chantel tonight for our book, which this series has been based on. So thank you for that, Chantel. one more thing I wanted to mention was that this whole conversation reminds me of a conversation of an author named Deborah Creamer, who talks a lot about limit. And Deborah Creamer says that it's a good thing that none of us are self-contained, because the fact that we all have limits means that we all have need of each other. And really, that was what Tim's devotion was about at the opening as well. So Becky has an invitation for you, and then we're going to, we'll ask Tim to close out. But then after that, I'm wondering, Chantal and Jasmine, would you be able to stick around for just a little bit in case others have questions or
Certainly,
things?
yeah.
Okay, thanks. All right. So Becky and then Tim, and then if you'd like to stay and chat yet with our speakers, you're certainly welcome to do that.
Hi, everybody. Thank you again for being here tonight. So last week, when Bethany was here, we had a bit of a conversation near the end, and she mentioned an author that she really liked, and a few of us jumped on board to say we also did. So I have a little bit of an announcement. I'm just going to show you. We've been talking kind of behind the scenes this past week, and we're actually going to start a book club in January. So we're going to stick to Thursdays. They seem to work well for everybody. I am pushing it a little earlier to 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern, and we're going to do it for 3 weeks. I'm really hoping that you will join me in this one. The book club is the book that she just wrote is No Cure for Being Human. And we'll take 3 weeks together to just connect and share about everything she has. Do not worry. I'm going to be sending out a lot of information. This was just your little preview of an exciting thing to come. So you can look for more information on that. I'll be putting it out in the newsletter that's coming out very soon. You'll see it on the network where we post a lot of information. But also, just to wrap up this series, because I've had some people asking, like, where can I find the recordings and things like that. So I'm just going to put together a very cohesive email to all of you that have participated with all the information. So where you can access all the recordings, where you can get information for all our speakers that have been here, how to order the book if you need more copies, how to join the book club. So it'll be, look for a very information-packed email that will come early this coming week, because it's Friday and it won't get done tomorrow, but Monday or Tuesday you will see it. So thank you. This has been very exciting, and I'm actually going to hand it over to Kara next for a minute.
Oh, I'm actually going to hand it over to Tim, but I do want us to do a quick thank you to Chelsea and Becky, because they did a lot of the legwork, and a lot of us just got to talk, but they actually did the work. So thank you. And Tim, if you would be willing to go ahead and bless us as we go. And yes, people, please feel free to stay and visit for after. Tim, you are welcome to unmute yourself and go.
Alrighty. Well, if I could sum up tonight with one word, it would be potential, or maybe 2 words, hidden potential. And that's one of the things that I like about God, is that he sees potential in all of us, potential for great things. Sometimes we don't see it, we don't get it. I know there's been a number of times in my life where God has said, "Hey, Tim, I want you to write a book." What? I don't know how to write a book. And I asked God if he's crazy. And then he shows me that he's not crazy. He just sees a hidden potential in me. And that's what I think of when I think of tonight. Tonight's been all about potential, or hidden potential, helping others see their potential, or helping others discover something that they didn't know, like Chantel's story about getting on the school bus so she could take part in the youth ministry's away trip. Yeah, potential. And that reminds me of Ephesians chapter 3, verses 20 and 21, where it says, Now to God be the glory. May God get all the glory. Who helps us to I forget the verse now. To him who is able to do more than we can ask or imagine, to God be the glory. Because God sees a potential in us that sometimes we don't see. We are able to do great things for him, for his kingdom, to help others see their place in God's kingdom. And I pray that as we go from here, we'd see that verse lived out in the next week or two or month or chunk of time, however small or large that may be, that with the power of God that goes with us, we'd be able to see more than we can ever think to imagine.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, everybody. We wish you all a blessed night, and we give thanks that you guys have been with us all this time. Go forth, and we look forward to hearing your beautiful stories. Take care, everybody. Ooh.